appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. With
Thanks again
everybody,
for having me on.
with everybody that comes on the show, I always like to go back to the start. Where did you grow up? What was life like for you growing up?
I grew up in the Midlands in Ireland, Tullamore, County Offaly. What life was like, I suppose, was similar to everywhere in Ireland back then. I don't think there was great difference anywhere. Maybe up in Dublin, but everywhere else was pretty much the same.
And for you growing up, then when did you first, what was your first exposure to movies, and then maybe more so with a focus on horror? Was there any particular moment in time you remember as being like the maybe catalyst for you being so interested in it?
Yeah, movies, like there was a good cinema in Tullamore, so we were lucky that way. And there always, like there had been for years. I suppose, like a lot of the Irish towns and cities, we were well served by cinema, even like back from the early like 1910 upwards, I suppose, because you go around and there was all these old buildings in Tullamore that had been cinemas that were now bookshops or
Mm-hmm.
pubs or dance halls or whatever. But luckily, we were still left with the sort of a omniplex as it was then, even though it wasn't any chain or anything. And I used to go as regularly as I could and as regularly as I could afford to go, um, to whatever was on. And in terms of horror, uh, I don't know how it happened as such. I kind of came to it through books. I used to read like King and Kuntz and Herbert, and I kind of they were the authors that I read pretty much all the time. I did read the odd time books like Amityville Horror or some of the Lovecraft stuff. I just found it. I suppose it would transported you to another world,
Mm-hmm.
and that was where my interest began. And it was funny because I used to sleep with this like teddy bear dog over my eyes because I'd be so scared after reading the books, you know. And maybe it's just because it fired up the imagination, which can often be a scarier thing. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of movies, I suppose the ones I saw as a kid, and too young to see them, but usually in other people's houses, either in cousins' houses or in friends' houses. The two that kind of stuck in my head from back as a kid would be The Omen, which scared the crap out of me as a kid.
I
I
can
don't know
imagine.
whether it was whether it was just the Catholic upbringing and the idea of the devil or whatever. I don't know, but or whether it was just the way that the atmosphere of that movie, and Nightmare on Elm Street, they were the two that kind of scared me the most as a kid.
Do you know what's funny about that? And I do think that the Omen thing, you're definitely onto something there, because even down here in Wexford, like we have Loftus Hall, and that whole story about the devil, and I have so many, like, you talk to so many different generations of people, and they all still kind of have that weird, like, and I think it's like the Catholic Irish thing where it's like, no, jeez, the devil was down there. I'm telling you, the devil was down there, and it's like this. Like, I feel like if you said that about anything else, people would be kind of like, it's so ridiculous. But for some reason, that kind of thing. So I can imagine that the Omen was quite shocking over here when people went to see it. And Nightmare on Elm Street is a one that comes up a lot with writers and directors. A lot of people credit that as something that kind of was the first thing to completely just like, I guess, everybody dreams. So I always tie it to that. I don't really know why everybody seems to credit that particular movie as the one that like really got them the imagination going and getting worked up.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it was the age that I saw it, or whether there was so many ideas in each of those movies. I don't know. I don't know what it is like that. I've no idea. And like you said about the Omen, it's easier to kind of figure that one out. And it's funny that you were saying about Loftus Hall, because there was a church back in Tullamore as well. And like, I mean, I'm sure every town had this story that
Mm-hmm.
if you ran around it three times, you'd see the devil. And as kids, you'd be daring each other, and like no one would do it. That's the
Mm-hmm.
funny thing. Like as kids, you're down there, And no, that's the extent of the real fear that was there. No one would run around this church 3 times at night, uh, even on a dare. They'd be like, "We're just not doing it." It's funny how it just came into the head. But yeah, the Nightmare on Elm Street thing, I don't know what there was. And Poltergeist as well. Actually, as a kid, that was another one that really engaged me, and stuck with me.
Do you think this is just a thought I've had now since you've said that? Do you think maybe back then, maybe not so much so now, those ghost stories, demonic possessions, and things like that resonated more with like Irish culture, maybe culture in the UK, a bit more than your run of the mill slashers and different things like that, just because of, I guess, people could tie it to reality somewhat.
I think so. I think that's a very good point, and it has the same, like there was the same thing to do with Ouija boards, that people being terrified of the Ouija board and not wanting to even mess with it or invite, even have the chance of inviting anything in there, like like that it had that power over kids. Like I don't know how much power it had over adults or whatever, but definitely over kids. And I suppose there was like I used to have different, like there was a friend of mine, the two of us used to listen to Iron Maiden as kids, and he had all the pictures up on the wall, and his mother was like constantly tearing them down, telling him take those pictures of Satan off the wall, this sort of thing. It was really it was kind of the thing back then, like
I had this conversation a while back with somebody else who has a quite a large podcast actually, and we were talking about that whole idea of the correlation between people who maybe like horror films or people who like a certain type of music, um, and different things like that, and then this I don't know if I want to call it a fascination, but this thing that the I guess the mainstream audience like to do, where they draw lines between, like, I don't know how many times I've read stories of like these unfortunate real life stories of like people killing their families or kids or their husband or wife, and then anytime they can, they find that like TMZ thing where it's like, oh, and also actually the week before he done that, we found a cinema stub for Nightmare on Elm Street. So there's obviously a tie here. Um, do you think that's just to sensationalize the story, or why do you think that always crops up? Like, I feel like even again now, true crime has like gone through the roof, and I feel like that the amount of times they try and tie horror films, like you mentioned Iron Maiden, all these different types of music, very specific things though, and say, oh, well, we found Marilyn Manson CDs in his room, so obviously he was going to be a serial killer.
yeah, it's bananas. I don't know what the, I suppose those sort of things that happen, people have an instinct to try and find the reason why, and if they can blame it on something that to them seems, oh, it's this thing. It's that's why they did it. It's not that they were a terrible person from the start, or it's not that they had terrible experiences at home or with someone else, or maybe it just came out of nowhere. Maybe they were just born that way. Who knows? But the idea of that is probably, the idea that someone could be born a killer is probably scarier than the idea that someone is influenced by a horror
Mm.
movie or metal music or whatever.
And that's what I like. I suppose in a way I get it for a headline. I probably it sounds great. I that podcast I was talking about. We done an episode on a guy who was referred to as the Queen of the Damned killer. He was a Scottish guy who apparently became obsessed with the Queen of the Damned movie,
Right.
and he would see her like at night and stuff, and she would tell him like you have to sacrifice somebody to become a vampire and be immortal and all this stuff. I suppose I can kind of, in a way, if I was working from a business aspect for a newspaper, I can understand why you'd want to call it like Queen of the Damned,
Absolutely.
vampire killer, blah blah. But
Mm.
I think it is overlooked how scary the idea is that, in my opinion anyway, with a lot of those cases, that's brooding in that person. Because if you actually look at that guy's story in particular, and time again it happens, he's had a whole life of just like not no normality whatsoever, just this insane life up to that point, and it makes you wonder like at what point or how long have these things been going on in his head, and then he just latched onto an idea. I think that's way
Yeah,
scarier than thinking, oh, someone watched Freddy Krueger and then he wanted to go and kill somebody.
absolutely. You're dead right because no one watches Freddy Krueger and then goes out and wants to throw on a glove and
Yeah.
you know it just doesn't that just does not happen. And I'd say there isn't a psychologist on earth who would say that would happen, or certainly no one with any credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you say, it definitely is something that's been, just brewing over time. And like you say, it's a scary thought. But I suppose newspapers want to sell newspapers, and it makes it more sensational if you can blame like that Queen of the Damned or Marilyn Manson or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sort of a one. It's like a nice tweet or whatever, rather than trying to go through a 20-page essay over all the things in this person's life that may have contributed to make them this way. It takes a bit more effort.
Yeah. Uh, and it always makes me wonder as well. I see that fact every now and again, and I don't know if it's obviously probably just a made up thing, but it makes you wonder. That whole idea of everybody has walked past some form of killer or murder or whatever at least once in their life and all that stuff, and it often makes me wonder. Um, say like you visit a place like New York, and you take the subway and you walk through the city, and there's so many people passing by. It often makes me wonder, like, have I ever been in close contact with somebody who has gone on to do something absolutely just ridiculous?
It's a scary thought, and
Mm.
it's probably true. And I remember being coming off the subway the first time I was in New York, and I met this guy, random guy in one of the parks. I was just sitting there, and he was like, "Yeah," he said, "next time you're on the subway, take a look around," because he said, pretty much half the people are carrying guns. And I was thinking, coming from Ireland, that was an
You think,
insane thought.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
half the people around me are carrying guns. Like it's like wow, it's. I know that's off the topic from what you were saying, but
no, but it's
it's
true. And I had this conversation a while ago with somebody else as well, one guy from Canada and the States, and they were kind of I guess blown away by the fact that they never thought about, like, we live in a country where not everybody walks around armed, and if you were to see a gun, if I was to walk down the main street of Wexford, and if one person was to walk up that main street with a pistol, the
mm,
entire town would be in like disarray.
yeah,
But it's like I often think about that. I'm like, if you had something like scary, like the Columbine shooting or something like that, if you just had two guys who went nuts, like over here, it's scary when you think about it. And I hope that nothing like that would ever happen. But the damage that could be done is like
yeah,
it's scary. And I think for people in the States, like you said, for us, it's such a culture shock. Like you're getting on this subway with all these hundreds of people, and potentially all of them are armed.
yeah. That's it.
It's
Potentially is right.
bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. And you got to think, what are their reasons for being armed? Some of
Mm,
them are terrified. Some of them think, well, if everyone else is armed, I better be armed. Some of them probably grew up with guns and think it's the same as carrying a bag and a phone. And then there are people who are thinking, I'd love to just put this gun in that person's mouth and just shoot it because, like, they're snoring or whatever. So
mm-hmm.
it's just a bizarre, it's a human thing, bizarre.
Yeah, and that's why I think that tying stuff like movies and music and all that is just a little bit of a reach for me. I'm a huge true crime guy, and so many times you hear these stories like time and time again, and like I can't remember the guy's name. I watched a documentary only yesterday about this guy, and I don't know how I hadn't heard of him. Just another like absolutely psychotic, just sick. And to hear him when he finally got caught, and they're interviewing him, and he basically just gives up the whole thing. But it's like he's enjoying. He gets them to order like a big McDonald's, and he's kind of chilling in the room, and he's going through the whole story, And just to hear him talk about the stuff, he's like, yeah, no, after I done it the first time, it was kind of by mistake. I only planned to like tie her up and torture and like assault her, and then I realized that I killed her, and then I realized I preferred that over sex and over this and over that and over everything. He was like, then it just became like I just got off on it basically. I was like, that's such a mad, like,
Yeah,
it's hard to actually fathom the idea of, you know, we watch these movies and a lot of times I've gotten flack for saying it's an escape to watch horror or sci-fi or these things, you know, because people say, oh, but that's, you're escaping to like these horrible. Mm, I mean, yes and no. I think it's the notion of being safe in that world, like knowing ultimately that you're safe in that world, versus actually being tied up and tortured by somebody.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a bizarre thing. Do you think that that's? I feel like the horror genre still doesn't get as much props as it probably should. Do you think that has a part to play in that?
It's so hard to know. Like, it's so hard to know. Like, it was definitely the case years ago. Definitely the case that people would be more inclined to blame horror rather than blame individuals. And I totally agree with you on the escapism thing, because I mean some of the things that happen in the real world are way more horrible than anything you'd find in a horror
Yeah.
movie. So it is escapism. But I do think I don't know what it is in the last maybe 5 years. It seems to be turning more. I don't know whether it's more mainstream. I don't know whether horror films are going more mainstream or whether they're becoming more interesting to the mainstream. I've no
Mm-hmm.
idea. I mean, you read these articles in the likes of Variety and that say horror films are selling like hotcakes at the various film markets, and I mean, so obviously they know, or else they just realize that the horror audience is a very enthusiastic and loyal bunch of people, and that's the other thing that people don't appreciate unless you go to conventions, or unless you go to like the big horror film festivals over Europe, or in Ireland here, the horror festivals that we have. You it's only when you go there that you realize how absolutely amazing the horror community are. Like, honest to
Mm-hmm.
God, amazing people, enthusiastic, the kindest, nicest people you could meet. Um, if everyone could just meet them, then this association would be completely blown away. Like, all they'd have to do is just go to any of these festivals and just meet some of the people there, and they just go, "Oh, what these are like." Wait, I can imagine if you were at some meeting of the World Economic Forum, you'd meet a way more dislikable people than you're going to meet
Mm-hmm.
at a horror festival, or a horror movie, or any of these things. So I do think it gets a bad rap.
And on the topic of that, actually, I had seen Jamie Kennedy, who played, for anyone who doesn't know, who played Randy most famously in Scream. He actually put out a video, I think it was yesterday, uh, and it's like a half an hour long of him talking about basically crediting the horror community and horror conventions um, for showing, I guess, the rest of the film industry and all those cultures, you know, merchandise, game, and all these different things. Um, how, I suppose, from a business standpoint, how much money can be made and the profit that's there, and then, you know, how loyal the fan base is and how huge it is. I think that's another thing that's really underplayed. That, you know, oh, there's only this like creepy sect of people who actually like horror films, and they look like this. They look like Marilyn Manson did in the 90s, and, you know, or they're obviously like the Columbine guys wearing these trench coats, and they're just weirdos. And I have seen so many different people. It's the same as like we were talking off air about you know, something like jujitsu. I see people in their 50s, and I see kids who are 6, and some people have long hair and like rock music. Some people like rap music. Some people like Dolly Parton. Like, there's no real, you know, it's really hard to categorize and say, oh, that person has got to be, or that's the way they look. Um, but yeah, he just he said basically, he echoed exactly what you've just said about how insane it is to, okay, you go to a Comic Con and you know it can be good and people are into it and blah blah blah, but then you go to a horror convention and he said it's just like next level. Like people who had, you know, maybe two or three bit parts in a movie 35 years ago, and they just get so much attention and love and support, and it really is like, I see the amount of people that get booked for these conventions, and I don't mean this in a slight, but they get so much interaction with fans still. I mean, I've heard a couple of stories about some of these conventions, and you know, there's guys who are playing pretty high up roles in something like The Walking Dead, and they're not getting as much attention as, you know, somebody who played a Cenobite in Hellraiser.
Yeah, yeah,
It does say something, I think.
definitely. And I listened there when you interviewed, speaking of the Cenobites, Nicholas Vince,
Mm-hmm.
who is like another wonderful sound guy. I've met him at a couple of festivals. So nice,
Yeah,
and that's the thing with like that. Like when you're talking about these people who are like, it's not just the audience; it's also the actors and the artists who were involved in making those films are all in general. I know you can't say everyone's
yeah.
amazing, but I think there's a larger proportion of
That
really
are, yeah.
talented people. You know,
Like I've had the chance to talk to so many different people like yourself, and I have had maybe one bad experience. Now I'm not
wow,
saying that that means everybody is amazing, or whatever, but like at this point, you know, having talked to hundreds of people, I have had like close to zero bad interactions with anybody, and a lot of that stuff goes on behind the scenes. So, I mean, by all means, they could be just like, yeah, fuck off, and do you know what I mean? Like it's not, and I've just been, I was so surprised at how receptive anybody who's involved within those communities are to, you know, talk and giving advice, giving a helping hand. It is crazy. And on the topic of that, then, what at what point in your life then did you, like you said, you were was reading something that you started before kind of the movies were kind of big in your life?
yeah, I would say that reading was like, I mean, I love the movies as well, but I wasn't I wasn't living in a movie loving family. So in general, with when it came to the movies, it was with friends, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the books that kind of started me in the horror genre. Anyway, it was the books. I mean, it was the funny thing. I was reading horror books as long as I can remember. I don't even know when I started, but in terms of watching the films, they came later to that extent. You know, back then I was still watching the odd one here and there, but it was solely horror that I was reading. Although I was reading a bit of science fiction as well, Arthur C. Clarke and different things too. But it was mostly horror with kind of sci-fi thrown in there.
And that's another thing as well. I think that gets underplayed sometimes is how fantastic some of those books are and some of those stories. And sometimes even if done the right way, nearly more immersive than a movie can be. And even in recent times, like go back to the 90s, something like Goosebumps, you know, for
Yeah,
younger kids and stuff like that was just like a I don't know. I suppose at the time it was like one of those things where you had never seen anything like it. I think as of this year, they've sold like 400 or 500 million copies, which,
wow,
yeah, it
wow.
just goes to show like how the power, I guess, that stuff has. And so when you started reading, then at what point did you maybe start to write your own little stories, or start to kind of have an idea of like, you know, this is something I'd love to do myself?
I started young enough, never with an idea that I could have it as a career as such, but
Mm-hmm.
just because I had stories and I'd write them, and there was a friend of mine who was a very good artist, and we used to kind of do these graphic novel things together at a very very basic level, um, and uh, like the idea of making a movie was like the idea of climbing Mount Everest. It was something that I felt was totally, in another world, completely unachievable. Like there was no one doing anything like it in Tullamore or anything like that. So the writing was a way of kind of getting in there, and then I suppose as I got more into movies, I started writing scripts, and I started sending them out. I was very naive at the time. I started sending them out to various production companies, um, and people got back to me, and they were like, "Yeah, we like the writing. What else have you got? And can you do this? And can you do that?" And there was options taken on a few of them, and I thought, oh, like this is something I could actually
Mm-hmm.
do. But even though there was options taken on a few of them, none of them got made, and I kind of started to lose patience with it. And in the end, I just borrowed a camera and started shooting films with friends, and like we'd each help each other make these films, and it just kept going and going. I'm living in Cork at the moment. I moved down to Cork afterward and set up this Ego Motion with friends of mine down here at the time. And at the start, there would have been, I don't know, there would have been 50 or 60 of us in it,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd help each other out with everything, whatever equipment we had. We'd help each other out. If we were like, we'd be doing these 24-hour competitions at the film festivals and that sort of thing, just to, and I suppose built it up over time, to
Mm-hmm.
to where I am now. But that's kind of how it was, a long, slow process. And I often wonder, if I'd known at the start, would the stuff be as good if I'd started off making them like as a kid? I don't. It's hard to know. It's hard
Mm-hmm.
to know. Like maybe the life experiences have gone into them now, having been through all that. And of course the friends I made, who I still make friends with, or make films with today. So like they're all amazing. So so it's been a great journey, but that's sort of a slope, not a sudden.
Yeah, and while that does happen, the amount of times I've had people refer to it as like the 10-year overnight success.
Yeah,
To
that's
everybody else is like, oh, you went and done your own movie just like that, and it's like boom. Not really. There was 10,
yeah,
maybe 12 years of just like constant imposter syndrome. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Is this ever going to happen? Is this going to work? How am I going to this? How am I going to that? Uh, that's all the stuff I think people don't see. They just see you when you've got a movie out, and they're like, this guy from a small town is after doing this now, and wow, that's
yeah,
amazing. It's, not so much.
absolutely. No, you're right. They do. Because I suppose no one's got their eye on you until that point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when that happens, it's like, oh, this came out of nowhere. It's like you say, it's the 10-year overnight success. Definitely, that's a good way of putting it.
And so when you started to make short films, then, um, was there an idea that you wanted to focus on horror, or was there anything in particular at that time that you were really focused on, or was it just a case of just create?
It kind of ended up it ended up being horror no matter what. And it was the same with the writing. I did write a few comedies and a sci-fi, but mostly they were horrors. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it just I suppose because I had been reading horror all my life, it seeped into the brain, and it just seemed to come out that way. And so I shot a couple of other small things, like I don't know what genre you'd put them into really, but I was shooting horror short films, I don't know, for the last, I suppose, 12 years. Some of them are up. Some of them that wouldn't be of that standard, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't put up. But yeah, it was mostly horrors, and kind of as time has gone on, exclusively horrors. Although I did do a sort of a sci-fi thing there recently, because I was keen. I do a bit of VFX stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a few things I wanted to do, and I had this kind of idea that I wanted to do with a friend of mine down here, a kind of a futuristic cowboy sort of steampunky thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's horror in it too. I mean, it's only like a 4 minute short, but even though it's probably in the sci-fi genre, probably, but there's definitely horror in it too. So it does kind of swing that way with me. All right.
Do you think, um, and we'll get to it in a sec. Obviously, you've done some pretty great things previous to now. Would you consider yourself more of the mind, or would you prefer one or the other? You know, obviously you have these stories where you get somebody like Lee Wan L or James Wan who, you know, they make a film like Saw as a college project or whatever you want to call it, and it just takes off, and they get these huge Hollywood careers. But then you hear of, say, like a filmmaker like Adam Green, who seems to have carved himself his own little corner of the horror world, and kind of he's more of the mind of, he finds it very hard, I think, to get some of his ideas made. So he kind of just does that, kind of like what you said, where it's like, the fuck you, right? We're all gonna get together, and we're all gonna make our own shit over here, and our own platform and our own everything. Is there one or the other that you would prefer?
That's a very good question. And my answer to it would probably depend on when you're talking to me. You know, it would depend on like in the past, I'd be like, oh, I want the Hollywood budget.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make Hollywood movies. These days, if you could find a happy medium
Yeah.
where you could get a good enough budget to make, because really creative control and non-interference would be great. Like I love feedback. Feedback is amazing. I don't make anything without getting it, but that's different to studio feedback, who are telling
Mm-hmm.
you the audience wants X, Y, and Z. That could totally change the direction of your film, or people who don't know what you're trying to do. You know, I like Kubrick's life, where he had his house and he worked with a small crew and just made the films he wanted to make. And you know, he would have had obviously Hollywood budgets, but if there was some way of doing that,
Mm-hmm.
you could make a film. Because I've got like I've got a lot of feature scripts, you know, because I just write them. I write them regularly. I like to do it as an exercise, but they're always something that I'd be interested in. Some of them have
Mm-hmm.
big budgets, some of them have small budgets. But I would have, would say, the next four feature films planned out, uh, all at a higher budget than the last. But even at the bigger budget, they wouldn't be like Hollywood level huge budgets. You know, they're kind of
Yeah.
Blumhouse budgets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, if you could get to the stage where you could make stuff here in Ireland, uh, with good creative control, and just come out with a movie every couple of years, I'd love that. I'd love it. You know.
You mentioned there, and it was something that popped into my mind straight away. You mentioned Blumhouse, and I feel like that there's probably some other companies, but that's always the one that jumps to mind about. I always hear quite good feedback in as regards creative control and not getting completely obliterated with notes and feedback. Um, that's probably somewhere where maybe you would like to go and try your hand at.
It would be. It would be definitely. I mean, the thing is, like, there's a lot of things to admire about Blumhouse. A lot of things. Like, it is a shame that we don't have it over here, or even like the old Hammer horror days
Mm-hmm.
in the UK. I know they're talking about starting it up again, and like it would be great even if over this side of the world there was something similar, you know,
Yeah.
because there is an audience there, and there are talented filmmakers out there, and you've talked to a lot of them over the years, and you know, people with great ideas, and who have already put their ideas into practice and shown it. Like, it would be a shame if you have to go to the States every time
Mm-hmm.
to do it, even at the Blumhouse level. It would be nice if there was a sort of a Blumhouse in Ireland or in the UK. um, but that would be a nice model, and I like the fact, you know, they say, you know, you get your budget, and you don't get that much notes, and you don't get a big ball of money, and if your film fails, it's on you, and that's fair enough, you know.
That it's a pretty good way of doing it. I mean, because then at least there's no, you know, if it doesn't work, and so, well, it was your movie and whatever. And I suppose it's essentially risk free for them to a degree. And do you know what I like as well? There's a lot of times I think they've released movies that have probably started off like that. You know, what they would consider like a low budget, um, and like these things just become absolutely huge. Like Chris and Travis, who wrote and directed The Gallows, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Like I remember when that was all coming about, and they were like, we had the script and we shopped it around, and no one really wanted it, and this and that, and this went on for years, and then they eventually somehow came across Jason Blum's desk and had a few conversations with him, and just off the back of a couple of promo like TV spots or trailers, that whole thing, they had that Charlie I don't even know what you call it, but like kind of like a Ouija board kind of thing with the
Yeah, yeah,
pencils, and it just took off. Like, and they said like it's crazy how we spent all this time going to all these places, and everybody was just like, no, 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 or they wanted to do it, but it was like, right, if you're gonna do it, he needs to have a big knife and needs to have
yeah,
this, and and it's like what you're saying, where it's like, no, it's not my movie anymore.
yeah,
It's like at what point, like you said, there needs to be some form of a balance.
yeah.
Um, so I'm actually surprised as well that Blumhouse haven't got a European division or something like that at this point. I think that's a little bit of a misstep, maybe. Now, I will say, do you find I've noticed that maybe in the last 6 7 months that Ireland and Irish horror seems to be getting mentioned a lot on places like Bloody Disgusting and different things like Shudder have picked up a couple of movies. Um, Obviously, Kate Dolan had Cat Calls on Shudder maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I remember seeing that, and at the time I messaged her and I was like, "Well, that was actually really, really good, and I'm happy that you've got it on Shudder and this and that." And we kind of talked back and forth, and she was like, "I said, what's going to happen next?" And she's like, "Look, I'm trying to push to make this a thing, but I don't know what's And now to see that she's getting some credit and some push. Do you find that maybe these companies and these places are becoming a little bit more receptive to movies made here?
I think you're right. I like as I've heard it from a few people who I know who have films like on the likes of Shudder and that, and Shudder have been great really, and are becoming more proactive. Even at the small short film level. Like funnily enough, in the last, I don't know what it is, but in the last month maybe, my own short films have been going through the roof in terms of
Mm.
views. Out of the blue, the horror ones, like even ones that I made 9, 10, 11 years ago are starting to fly up in views. And I don't know why that is, but I have noticed, like you said, that there is more of a focus on Irish horror movies. And for the life of me, I don't know where it's coming from. No idea.
Uh, and for you then, obviously, we can't get into the nitty gritty and find out all the little things, but is it something you're actively pushing now? Have you got any projects that you're like, I don't know, is it a case with Shutter? Do you have to have a finished product before you can go to them, or is it something where they?
Usually, Shudder have a few ways of working with people. If you, like Kate, have had a film on their platform, they in general are quite interested with working with you again. That seems to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you are trying to get something to Shudder, if you've got it already made, there seems to be a few production companies that do deal with Shudder, and you'd find out quite easily who they are by looking at the films on Shudder and seeing who produced the movies, and,
Mm-hmm.
those companies seem to have an in there. So if you so that reverses back again. If you have a script or if you have a movie that you want to make, some of those is particularly in Ireland. In the UK, it can be a useful thing to look at what's on Shudder, look at who made those movies, and talk to those producers and just see if they're interested. In particular genre, I suppose, like that, like horror has so many subgenres as well that some of those production companies will be focusing on particular subgenres.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like I remember talking to this guy at a market in Galway years ago, and I was pitching him a script, and he was interested in it, but he was a Dutch guy, and he was like, "Oh, And is the film full of gore? Is there like lots of gore in the film? And I said, well, no, there's not that much. And he was like, oh, it's not for us, so not for us. We just do gore movies. That's it. And I thought, yeah, that's horror for you. Like there's the supernatural, there's the found
Mm-hmm.
footage, there's the gore, there's the there's so many elements to it that it's such a vast genre. But so if people were looking to make something, that's how I would go about it. That's how I do go about it. I have a few things myself at the moment. There's a script that I've been working on that turned out to be kind of suitable for a TV series. So I've got that Seminary Lane. I've got it with a couple of production companies who are showing it around to the TV stations and the streamers at the moment. Um, Funnily enough, making a TV horror series in Europe is difficult. Like definitely the TV channels aren't really interested. It's only the streamers. Like we talked to all the broadcasters, and like the production companies that are involved know what they're doing. They've been in the game for a long time. Um, but trying to set like it's almost like you have to tone down the horror element.
Mm.
Trying to, and you're thinking, well, it's a horror show, and like horror fans want the horror, and we're horror fans, and we want to deliver the horror. And then you're in a meeting with someone, and they're like, can you tone down the horror elements? It's like, well, you're trying to make it into a drama. Then it's not a drama,
Yeah.
you know.
It's funny, and I always say this to people, and I feel like it's just like these broadcasters and TV stations, it's like they'll just never learn. And I often think, like, I'm like, do you want to become the radio? Like, is
Yeah,
it going to be, because in my opinion, it's already nearly there. I mean, most people consume content on their phones now, iPads, computers, and then, things like Netflix, Shudder, Amazon Prime, all these different things. Um, and I just find it so bizarre that they're still not willing to, and especially like you said, do a tiny bit of research. I mean, look at even some of Netflix's most popular original series, or things that they've bought up. Even something like Stranger Things, huge. The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor, huge. Um, Time and time again, like, these
yeah.
things just prove to be huge, and I'm really surprised that more of these stations aren't willing to take a chance and snap something up. You'd probably over here then, if that were to go ahead, you'll probably be like a trailblazer for that, right? Because there's not that many shows that have come out of this side of the world, I don't think.
You're right. That's true. Um, That is true, and maybe that's why it's so difficult as well. Like and I mean, fair play to the production companies involved because they love the idea and they were on board pretty much straight away, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we definitely we get someone behind this, no doubt about it." And it's funny they are like ourselves, kind of surprised that why aren't the broadcasters going
Mm.
for it. It's a bizarre thing, but yeah, like it would be great. I mean, if it did happen and if it started something over here, fantastic. It would be really amazing.
Do you have a Speaking of subgenres, do you have a particular subgenre that maybe you prefer to play in, or with some of the stuff that you have that's yet to be released, is there a trend there? Like, do you kind of find yourself leaning towards particular subgenres?
Uh, I probably lean towards the supernatural horrors.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be they're the ones that I tend to rewatch, and they're the ones that I tend to write. So yeah, the supernatural would be
Where
would
you
be
go.
where I go. Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of that, when you say about rewatch, I always ask people about like their favorite comfort horror films. It doesn't necessarily. I find the question of asking somebody, what's your top three favorite movies ever, can always be quite a hard question. Is there a handful of movies that come to mind when you think of things that if you've had a shitty day or a shitty week, that you'll just kind of go and stick on, or maybe if you're trying to get the mind going, you might put something on in the background.
Yeah, there are a few that you'd kind of reach for. All right, I mean, I love the Carpenter movies. In the Mouth of Madness, I love The Thing. I love The Fog. I tend to I just enjoy them. You know, I just
Yeah.
really enjoy those movies. I love Lynch's movies, not horror, but just the atmosphere of them and everything. I've always found them gripping. So Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway, I kind of go back to a lot. Jacob's Ladder is another one that I love, and that I don't know how many times I've rewatched that. It just it's amazing. Some of Mike Flanagan's stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love. And he's great. I mean, I suppose he is a trailblazer of sorts, and to an extent, like he influenced my first short horror, even though there's no real relation between them. But he made the Oculus short film years and years ago. I think it was probably before he'd made anything else. It was like a half an hour short film. I saw it at a festival, and I was blown away by it. It was a half an hour, and there was nothing going on. It was all in one room, but the mirror was there, of course, and the guy with the cameras and blah blah blah. But just the atmosphere, and I just thought this is amazing. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, this guy, I can't wait to see what he does next. And he didn't do anything for a while, but thankfully he's been recognised since. But yeah, some of his movies as well. So
Mm-hmm.
they'd be the kind of ones, like you say, the shitty day ones that you're just gonna throw on.
Yeah. If you could write or direct a film in an existing horror universe, is there something that you'd love to play with, and why so?
That's a tough one because I suppose even in the last uh, like 20 years or so, in particular, maybe even more recently, like there's been a lot of I don't know remakes or messing
Mm,
around with something, and some of them are excellent. You know, some of them are really good, but there's a lot of bad ones out there. So I'd be very careful about going into any of, would say, my favorite um, series. You know, like it would be I'd be tempted to do something with Alien
nice.
just because Ridley Scott has kind of brought it more in the sci-fi way. Like Cameron brought in the action, and Fincher did his own thing with it, and it'd be kind of cool to bring it back to the
Mm-hmm.
original horror, the horror genre, just totally the horror genre. You know,
Yeah.
that sci-fi is just a bit of an element of it, but actually make it a horror film. You know, it'd be interesting to do something with it.
That's actually an interesting one because I still feel like uh in a lot of ways it hasn't been given justice in more modern times, and I just feel like there's a huge gap there for something amazing to be made.
Totally, I totally agree. It's gone in such strange ways, and there's there's interesting ideas there, but there's nothing like its true potential.
Yeah, yeah. Um, is there any other scripts or projects that you're working on that you can talk about, or something maybe that you're like really excited for, other than obviously you said that you guys are shopping the TV show at the minute.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I wrote a script with Damien McCarthy. He did Caveat. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, yeah,
And we talk about horror movies a lot, and we'd be anytime he's one of my soundboards. If I've ideas, I'd be like, what do you think of this? Blah blah blah. But anyway, we wrote this self-contained haunted house thing that's like really cool. I love it. I have to say, I'm tremendously excited about it. So we have sent that out to a few producers, and we'll see what happens with it. It's a really really tight uh, kind of like haunted house horror, So hopefully something will happen with that. And yeah, I'm working on a couple of other
mm-hmm.
scripts at the moment that would be a similar sort of line, and one that's more Lovecraftian, that I kind of because I like you know, and you can do it with low budget, like films like The Void that kind of some
Mm-hmm.
people love or hate it, but they still made that on a low budget,
Yeah,
it has an impact. So it you can take the best things about it and make us a nice Lovecraftian horror. So I'm kind of thinking along those lines as well. Um, there are a few things that are kind of out there.
And for you, I guess your process when you sit down to write or come up with these ideas, is it something that um I guess, do you try and go out and get inspiration? Do you sit down and go, right, I'm gonna have like a brainstorming session, or is it a case of just everyday experiences, and if you spot something, you kind of jot it down or put it in your phone?
It's in everything. Funnily enough, it can be it can be even films that I watch that I'd be disappointed with and think, well, it's such a shame they didn't bring it in this direction, and then I'd bring it in that direction and go backwards and
Mm-hmm.
rewrite the opening. It can be that. It can be different things I read in the newspaper, like Beyond the Woods was reading that the gates of hell sinkhole opening in China, and I remember thinking that's actually a great premise for horror if you could just bring
Mm-hmm.
that into a rural setting and do something with it. Um, so it can be those things. I tend to I have like notes on my phone. I used to kind of type them in, but now I just record them anytime I think of an idea. It's got to the point that different people that I work with sometimes send me ideas. They're like, "Oh, have you seen this story from like this obscure newspaper in America?" And I read it, and I'm like, "Oh, that's just brilliant," So I have way more ideas than I'm ever going to be able to do anything with. But you kind of recognize the ones that have a bit of potential, they could
Yeah.
go somewhere, and also ones that are achievable. Like if it's something, because I do while I'm doing all this, trying to get another feature and the TV show and that. While I'm doing all that, I'm also making short films because I just like to keep doing it. I like to get out there, I like to shoot, like working with actors, like putting ideas together. So just really low budget things. Like I shot one during COVID with a real couple who are both actors and they're great.
Mm-hmm.
But there was certain things you couldn't do. I had to shoot them from outside a house instead of going in, and I had to shoot them from outside a car instead of going in, and these sort of things. But
Mm-hmm.
we were able to do it. Like there was only 4 or 5 of us on that, and those sort of things. So I do like to shoot stuff kind of all the time.
Yeah. And um I suppose for you, when you're in this stage where I think it's something as well that doesn't it kind of gets glossed over. Um when you put these things together, you've got your idea and you're like, right, I'm kind of happy enough with where this is at, and then you start to approach, different producers in different places. Um is it difficult to deal with that, like that waiting period to see is something going to hit, especially when, like, obviously these things are in a way kind of like your children. You've crafted these things, and you want to see them done right, you want to see them out there in the world. How hard is that to, I guess, live your everyday life with this constant, maybe, I don't know, anxiety about, like, let's get the ball rolling here. I want to start making this stuff.
Uh, I'm stupidly optimistic, and that just seems to be the way I am all the time. So after Beyond the Woods came out, I went to a few film markets, and I thought I'd already written two features that would have been a good follow up. Um, they would have required a budget, but not a massive budget, and I thought that I thought I wouldn't have a problem making it because of the success of the other films. So I thought, okay, this would be easy. That was difficult because there was there was a lot of interest shown at those meetings. Whether the interest was genuine or not, it's hard to know. Um, and then over time, nothing kind of happened with them, and that was disappointing. But all the while, I kept writing and I kept making the shorts and that. And now I kind of realized that those films were probably over ambitious. I mean, whereas I could have made them for the type of budget that I was pitching to them, they were probably looking at it and thinking, "There's no way you could make it for this budget." And I know they have to think a certain way in terms of everything that goes with making a film.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at the moment, though, I would be very optimistic because like I said, the TV show is already with producers who are shopping it around. That script that I told you with Damien is already with producers who have expressed, like, I suppose the funny thing about the industry is people will never say no to you because they don't want to say no to what could be the next big thing. So they will always keep stringing you along. They always tell you this is great. There's very few. There are one or two that will tell you, look, this isn't for us, and I really appreciate it because then you can go, okay, I'll take it elsewhere, and we can do something. Most will just tell you, yeah, we love it, yeah, we're really busy at the moment, but talk to us in a year, whatever, and then you come back and it's like, yeah, no, we're definitely into that now, but blah blah blah, so they do keep stringing you along, and once you get used to that, that's just the way it works. Um, so I think it helps to have a few different things on the go, and that's why
Yeah.
with the TV series, with this thing with Damien, I've two others now that I'm kind of close enough to finishing. I'm going to try and put all those out at the one time. Now, nightmare scenario, but amazing scenario. They want to make them all, and then I'm fucked because. But I'll deal with that if it happens. But otherwise, you'd be hoping that at least one of them will hit the mark.
um, the idea of you mentioned there earlier being at film markets and festivals and different things, and getting to meet producers and other directors and writers and whatever. How difficult is the art of pitching an idea, or because right, so I've seen both sides of this coin in a way. I've had some people tell me that it's something that you really should nail down, and it's something that you've got to be good at, in the sense of uh, I was always of the mind that obviously you seem like quite a creative person, quite a good imagination. So when you have an idea, I feel like that you would be quite passionate about it and you would get across that world and that idea quite well. And I thought that would be enough. But then some other people have told me that, like you said, sometimes it can be a little bit different behind the scenes, and you kind of have to play within these certain parameters of, when you're pitching it to this kind of company or these kind of people, you've got to do it in a certain kind of way. They're not really going to get it otherwise. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there is a truth to that, definitely. I mean, it's never easy pitching, never easy. A good thing to get practice at, even to pitch to your friends and pitch to your family or whatever, anyone who listen to you, just to get over the fact of saying it out loud, whatever your pitch is. Like you say, the passion is hugely important because no one's going to want to work with someone who's like, oh yeah, it's okay, like I mean, that just doesn't do anyone any good. It has
Yeah.
you have to be, and once it gets to that level, I suppose the type of money involved and then the amount of people that it requires, you do need that passion, and you need an
Mm-hmm.
awful lot of it to keep the thing going from start to finish. Because even if you're lucky and you get people behind you, then you're going to have at least a year of keeping that passion going while you
Yeah.
make the thing. Also, though, a really important thing is building up relationships and just being a nice person, and that doesn't mean you've got to be life or soul of the party, Tony Stark going
Mm-hmm.
around the place, but just being nice, and that people are like, well, I like being around this person, and if I'm going to have to spend a year working on a film with this person, that's good. I'd be happy to do it. I mean, that's another thing. If you can build up relationships, it's a everyone talks about networking, and networking is a tough thing, but that's when you're thinking of it at the big level. But in reality, all networking really is going up to someone and saying, hey, you produced this movie, and I love that movie, and big fan of it, and you ask them what it was like to produce the movie. If they're interested in talking, they'll talk, and you've got a common interest. That's the beauty of these markets. Like, everyone is there because they do have a passion about film. So, like, I'm not saying it's easy to do. It does take us break it, because we all hate doing it, but it it if you can build up those relationships, it definitely helps. Then when you are pitching an idea to the person, you know them already, or they know you already, or at least they know you're a decent human being, and
Yeah.
you're passionate about
Yeah.
the film.
Yeah. When you said, when you mentioned about, the original concept for Beyond the Woods and stuff like that, it reminded me of, and I assume you've heard this, much like probably everybody else listening to this, the whole Wes Craven story behind Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street. He had read this newspaper article about people dying in their sleep and stuff, and it just reminded me. It sounds very kind of similar to, you seen this idea and you're like, this is something that can be made into a movie. To go from that point, right? Because I suppose for somebody on the other side of this, much like everybody else listening, it seems kind of, I suppose, in a way, like, I don't know, winning the lottery or something. To, often I might see something, I go, geez, wouldn't it be great if they made a movie of that, or wouldn't it be? But to go from that point then to actually making and releasing the movie and then getting like all this really good feedback, how, I guess, difficult, fun, strange was that whole journey?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix of all those things. I had before then been trying to do it the standard way of writing a script, going to producers, talking to them about it, and I had what would have been a low budget movie in it. This Catalyst thing that they did back, it was about 2013, might have been 2012. I'm not sure, around then.
Mm-hmm.
2012, I think it was, and they were giving people budgets of like 350 grand to make something, and after nothing happened with that, I thought, well, I can't do this myself, so I thought I'm going to try and write a script that I could do myself, just like with the shorts. And it took me a few attempts. It's hard to write something that you can make on no money.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more difficult than writing something with a big budget. I don't know, but it took me a few attempts to get to Beyond the Woods. And by that time, I had thought, okay, I need to make something like I can make, like the way I make the shorts, with actors that I know, with crew that I know, ideally a location that's not too far away, um,
Yeah.
and I had been kind of searching for that idea for a good while. So like that, with that, seeing that article in the paper, and then pretty soon afterward, I watched that science fiction film Coherence, which which was a slow move, a slow burn of a movie, but I thought amazing what they achieved by just a bunch of people in a house. And I thought, okay, I've got great actors, I can get them into like a really nice location. I spent a good while finding that house, and if I can marry two stories where all these people are there, and we can go out into the woods and shoot this. So I put the afterburners on, and decided, like, when I was 3 quarters of the way through writing the script, I started getting people involved because I thought I'm going to make this movie
Mm-hmm.
regardless. So by the time I had like the third draft of the script done, we were like about a week away from shooting. So some of the actors hadn't even seen the last 10 or 15 pages. It was mad, really, but they were all up for it, and they were amazing. They were amazing. I have to say, I got, like, one of the actors came on board 2 weeks before we shot, because one of the guys who I had originally got for that role, he ended up in hospital, and he couldn't make it. Like so that was the panic stations and the fear and the, oh my fucking god, what have I done, happens when things like that happen. You're
Yeah.
thinking, okay, everything, the house is booked. I've booked accommodation for the actors. The crew are there. Everyone is booked off this week, and now one of the actors can't make it, and fuck, I'm fucked. Why am I doing this? I can't shut down the production because it's going to cost me money at this stage anyway. And we'd run a funded campaign,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of to help along with it. So it would have been just money down the drain. Um, and also, a friend of mine who's an experienced first AD, he had told me, you're not going to be able to shoot it in a week. He'd given me detailed notes on like how to organize the script, and he said it's going to take you 14 days. And I was like, well, I have to do it in a week because I don't have the money to do it, for any longer than a week. But it turned out he was right, and I figured that out after about 3 days. After about 3 days, I was like, "Oh my god, we are not going to finish this movie in a week," and I was panicked. But then a certain sense of calm comes over you, and you go, "Look, let's just get what we can, and then we'll get the rest of the days another time." So it's that sort of an adventure. But the shooting itself, the actors were amazing, cast and crew were amazing. I mean, so good. It was like a retreat, and even though it was crazy hard work, there was there was cast and crew cooking meals for other people, running to the shop getting stuff. When we were shooting, it was like everyone mucked in.
Mm-hmm.
It really was an amazing experience in that way.
Like a real passion project. Do you
Absolutely.
think? Do you think that's why? I suppose passion and excitement for it is so important. That on that third day, like you said, when you wake up and you kind of the realization hits that, shit, I've got a lot of stuff to try and to work out here. Is that kind of what carries you through? Where you're like, well, look, we got to keep going.
It is, and I suppose it comes from if you give that out at the start, and you have to get people involved anyway, because they're giving up a lot of their time and their skills and everything, and like, why would they do it unless they felt, well, this is going to be something really good? So I mean, the passion starts before that, and it kind of carries itself. And if you're having a hard day, or if things are tough, other people still have the passion that you've all infused in the project at the start. So it takes it's like wind in the sails, and it keeps
Yeah.
it keeps the whole thing sailing on.
And I suppose to go through all that, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was like a couple of months then between that and the rest of the stuff.
There was like 6 months between it. It took ages, because trying to get a point there where all the actors and all the crew were available again
Mm.
for another period. I think we needed another 5 days. And I blocked it. Like, it was, I thought the best way to shoot this is to get everyone together in a house, and then put other people up in another house close by, and no one can go away. We're all there. There's no going home. There's no seeing your family or any of this stuff. You're like in the houses, and which meant that you had to get everyone to commit to that same amount block
Mm-hmm.
of time, which was tough. But it also meant that everyone was around for day shoots or night shoots, depending on whether the weather changed. You could move the shot list around to suit different weather and that. So it really worked. But what didn't work for the poor actors was that we shot the first half of the film in July, and the second half of the film in January, and
Oh,
they had to wear the same things, so they were outside in like little t-shirts and stuff. It was Baltic. It was so cold. It was so cold that we had umbrellas up over the gear, and when we finished shooting, they were frozen open. They were like, it was kind of misty rain, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
the ice, and then the umbrellas were frozen open, and the actors were out there in this with like t-shirts on them, and like in the crew, like with us behind the camera, we had like 20 jackets on. It was Baltic,
That's
but
commitment.
yeah, I know, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And right then, so to go through all that, right? All the struggles, obviously, all the years of crafting, your passion before that, to then get to the point where this thing, is released out into the world, and you start to get all this feedback, and it starts to kind of make a bit of noise, and it starts to appear on all these different places. um I suppose, how did that feel, first of all, and then, I guess, onwards from that, then at that point, what are you thinking then in your head? Like, where did you want to go? Where did you see things going? Was there a particular, I guess, thing that you had envisioned?
It was an amazing feeling once it took off. It took a while to take off, because I had sent it out to a lot of the big festivals at the start. Once again, my optimism. The big festivals are incredibly difficult to get into, and it's no surprise, because they only show, some of them only show 10 feature films, some
Mm.
maybe up to 20. That's about it. And like, they have all the big production companies putting in those films. So really, an independently produced film has very little chance of getting into them, and that would be a lesson learned. But once it did start taking off and it picked up a few awards and it started getting a momentum behind it, that was amazing. And I suppose the most, apart from the awards at the festivals, which was amazing, the other amazing thing was the feedback in all the magazines that we read, and the sort of blogs that we listen to, or podcasts that we listen to, and that was amazing. That nerve wracking at first, because when it starts coming out, you're thinking, "Oh my god, I hope they love the movie." You know, I hope they're not going to slate it. I hope they didn't hate it. And I would say 75% of the feedback was fantastic, which is as good as you're ever going to get, really.
Yeah.
And even the feedback that wasn't fantastic had their own reasons for it. I mean, some of them thought it was a slasher movie when it isn't. Some of them preferred the drama part of it and didn't want the horror part. Someone wanted the horror and didn't like the drama, and that's all personal opinion. But broadly, it was great. Um, and I suppose what I wanted to happen afterward is what all in general all filmmakers want, which is to get the budget for another one, and then to get the budget for another one and another one and another one. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I'm still fighting for, you know.
And how much, I suppose, has the whole without sticking on it too much, because I kind of, in a way, I feel like people are sick of hearing it, but I do think it's maybe important as well. Obviously from the, the business and career aspect, but also from like a, I suppose, a personal level, because so many people struggle with it. The last 2-3 years, obviously we've had this whole COVID situation going. Um, how much has that, I guess, stalled, affected everything for you, and how have you been able to keep yourself, like you said, optimistic, and not feeling like, Jesus Christ, like how are we ever going to get movies made again? How are we ever going to do anything again?
It definitely stalled everything by 2 years. I suppose it stalled feature film plans by 2 years. It's stalled. Well, it slowed down that TV series, because we'd been looking into studios and looking into things. Now, granted, we only kind of started it during COVID, so it hasn't slowed it down that much.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of all the things that you had to be looking out for, and everything that happened in terms of having like COVID officers, and makeup would have to be separate building, and everyone separate, and blah blah blah. It made things a lot more difficult in terms of making independent film. It shut it down for 2 years, because like in reality you were taking a risk. With You don't want to expose cast and crew to COVID. You don't want to expose them to any danger. Ideally, I know there's some productions that don't really care, but I do. And Also, it just made things a lot more difficult. Having said that, things seem to be really taking off again now. In terms of my own personal thing, I was able to write during that time, which was great. And I shot a couple of shorts, which was also great, even though on a much smaller scale. And I was able to do some corporate work that kind of
Mm-hmm.
kept the income going. So from all those things, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But it definitely stalled things. Like I would say I'm 2 years behind where I would be, but I'd say most people are 2 years behind where they would be. So I don't think I'm any different to anyone else.
Yeah. Um. Not to I guess back you into a corner with this question, but I'm a little bit interested to hear what you think. Do you think that writers, directors, content creators, all those kinds of people that are coming out of Ireland now? Obviously, in recent years we talked about earlier, people are starting to be given a chance. Do you think we get enough support here? Is there do you feel like you get enough back in Ireland? Is there enough things out there for us? And I suppose twofold on that. What do you think that we might need from I suppose from your standpoint, as the maker and creator of it, and then maybe from an audience standpoint, is it, do we need a I don't know, a channel? Do we need a streamer in Europe? Do we need, is it a website that's going to help? What would you attribute it to?
It's hard to know. Like you said, it's kind of surprising that Blumhouse haven't opened an outpost over here,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in Europe, and like that, if Hammer do something similar in the UK, maybe things would take off for the independent level. I do think we don't get enough support in this country at the independent level. I think there's a lot. I suppose this country has always suffered from the insiders outsiders thing, where if you're an insider, you get sorted out,
Yeah.
and that is in everything. Um, I think it's a real shame that we don't have kind of independent studios in the provinces where people can go and like if they're not free, that they be affordable, and that maybe deals could be made as retrospective payments, or those sort of things that could help the independent sector. I think it's sad the way that a lot of the things that were like everything's become centralized in terms of there used to be a film down here in Cork. Film in Galway is still going, and it's great, and they're very good up there.
Mm-hmm.
The film base is gone, and that used to be great. I mean, I did all my digibetas in there, and they were lovely people, and now it's all centralized, and I do think it's a shame that there isn't a less centralized approach. I don't know what the solution is, but like if there were independent studios in the regions that people could use at low cost, and maybe more training, it's definitely a case that there's not as much support. Uh, and it's a hard thing to talk about because I mean, it's easy to say there's not enough support, but unless you're offering the solution to it, um, you're just talking into the wind. And then when you're offering the solution or a solution, it's got to be properly worked out and everything. But it would be nice to have some sort of a studio structure and some sort of a funding for
Yeah.
people making these independent low budget movies, to support what, because there are people, and you've interviewed some of them. I've listened to Paddy, and I've listened to Mark, like both great filmmakers, really passionate people. Zoe Kavanagh, who did Demon Hunter years
Mm-hmm.
ago as well, like all filmmakers who have made films on a very very low budget, who have proven themselves, their passion and their commitment and their talent, and yet, um, you know, uh, haven't gotten the support that I think they deserve. So that'd be my opinion on that.
And that's what pains me, I think, about this. And again, like you said, without talking into the wind and kind of, it's fine to just, I guess, shit on something, but then have no solution or offer any suggestions. It just kind of pains me because it's like you alluded to earlier, about the fact that nobody pays attention to you until. And I just, and it feels like maybe it's a culture thing with here or whatever it is, but it's kind of like something like that's brushed to the side, and then all of a sudden, somebody has a hit, and then it's like, oh yeah, yeah, our guy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know, that just pains me. And for something, I think there's so many like yourself. There's so many incredible, writers, directors, and stories out there in this country. I think that probably a lot of them will probably never see the light of day because
it's
of that.
sad. Yeah,
It feels quite isolating. I think to you know to be on an island for a start, and not a big island at that, and then to not really have any support on that island. And I know some people say, "Oh, but sure, you know, just take the short trip to Hollywood and just,
yeah,
or just go to England or just go to Europe." And it's like that, like you said, like that's fine. Like, but if you're starting off at these low budget levels, how would you like somebody to get to LA and do these
yeah.
things? It's a bit of a reach. Like, in fairness, I know. Look, there's some people that have stories that have done things like that, but I think, from a more realistic point of view, there definitely should be something looked at there, and it's blown my mind, considering the success that have come in recent years, how nobody has kind of looked at that and went, Jesus, like, this is a sector where we're really just lacking and have been lacking
Yeah,
for
totally.
for as long as it's been going.
Totally, and even like our national broadcaster, where is the independent films there? You know, I mean, we pay for it by license fee, like, and all they're putting out is dreck, like an awful lot of dreck, and like they should be, there should be an element there that they have to support, and not the same bloody crowd that always gets support, but actually independent films, independent short films, independent feature films. You know, they should be showing them. Like, musicians suffer from the same thing here. I mean, I know so many amazing musicians in this country, amazing, and they don't get any airplay at all. And you're listening to them thinking these people are amazing, passionate, talented, really great music, and they get no support. And you look at countries like Australia, where they have a radio station that supports their music, and France, who support their film and music. And if you're going to have a publicly funded broadcaster, you bloody well better support your own people, and not. I don't mean your own people as in the people in D4 out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean your own people all over the country. Like, I mean, that's that would be my opinion on that side too.
That and I'll definitely second everything you just said there. And I actually, funny you mentioned that. I have a funny story. Right around, yeah, it would have been during COVID. At this point, I had been kind of, I suppose, sitting on an idea, and I had started to reach out to different places about the idea of having a slot somewhere that focused on Irish filmmakers, Irish film, and maybe just then movies in general, that people can get access to some of the news and different things and conversations. And I always thought about, and I was probably, I was thinking to myself, I was like, I'm probably shooting myself in my own foot here by, if I were to ever screenshot the email and send it out. But I thought about it for weeks about outing this person. So a pretty high level producer with RTE emailed me back to let me know a few home truths about people don't watch movies anymore, let alone want to listen about them,
Hmm. That tells you all you need to know.
which I thought was quite interesting. Uh,
Yeah,
Very strange observation that people no longer watch movies, and they definitely don't want to listen to people talk about them.
unbelievable.
Like that to me just kind of sums up everything you've just said. Like that, how ridiculous does that sound?
Yeah,
And it's one of those things, like we have what, a handful of channels that come out of the country, two channels, is it, whatever. How many more talk shows can we have? I mean, at this point now we're worse than the States in a way.
yeah.
We've a talk show for the morning. We've a talk show for brunch. We've a talk
Mm,
show at midday. We've the news. Then we've an afternoon talk show. We've an evening talk show.
yeah,
We've the nighttime talk show. Like, I mean, come on. Like,
yeah.
I think in the course of a week, RT probably show what, maybe two films, if even.
If even.
And then everything else to me just seems like reruns or
True.
programming that people have not cared about since, like, the early 1990s.
Yeah.
It's a very bizarre, like, I would either like to see them just completely just close down altogether, or just get a complete rehaul, because I feel like, if you were to come from somewhere else and look at that, like, surely to God, that business model and that programming has got to be ancient now at this point.
Who's watching it?
That's
Is
what
there
I
anyone under? Is there anyone under 40 that watches RTE? I don't know. I don't know anyone who watches it. I've no idea.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know who their audience are, but they're dying off. Like, and if you want to get a new audience, the way they're going about it isn't doing them any favors.
Like, I and I also was listening to somebody, I can't remember who it was, and it was somebody who's either still involved or was involved with RT, something again about the whole film industry and all that, and they mentioned Dave Fanning, and oh, that didn't really work out for Dave Fanning and blah blah. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, that is literally a lifetime ago.
Yeah,
Like, that's old news now. Like, you can bring it into a modern age. Like, and I don't know. I just think it's a huge misstep. I think it's a
Yeah.
massive misstep and a waste. Um, are you a collector of anything? I know I can see some movies and stuff there behind you. Do you collect movies or collectibles or books or anything like that?
Mostly movies, all right. DVDs, Blu-ray. I even used to collect those HD DVDs,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which were like because I had the add-on to the Xbox,
Mhm.
which is still working. Thankfully, I have it plugged into the computer here. But most of the HD DVDs, are, I mean, they're obsolete, of course, but they work great. And the odd bits and pieces, some masks and some character pieces and ads and t-shirts and those sort of things.
Mhm.
But it would be mostly movies. Yeah,
And what do you think it is about that? Because I'm always fascinated by this because like I collect anything and everything, and I'm a huge
even behind
movie
you
collector.
there.
I I just I don't know what it is, but I love physical media. Um, and I love the idea of, and only probably in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I love the idea of seeing a movie that I've loved, and then they re-release. Like I'm trying to think here, something like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Last Broadcast.
Yeah, yeah.
And like 101 Films in the UK re-released that a while ago, in a special edition with a nice book, a poster, and then you had all these special features. You had
Cool.
a new commentary track, a new. I'm always fascinated now by the. I think I could be sold on a re-release of a movie if it has an updated director and writer commentary. Uh, what do you think it is about that keeps the physical media side still kind of alive for the community?
It's so hard to know because, like that, it does seem to be like you probably see it from your own Instagram. Any of the people who are big into the genre
Mm-hmm.
uh, usually are have plenty of,
Yeah.
of things, and some like I'll be looking at some people and I'll be like, is there anything else in your house other than like
This, yeah.
all these, everything? It was like, my God, can you even move in the place? But yeah, I don't know what it is. I suppose there is, like, for one, the stuff is great. I mean, quite often there's effort put into it. So whether it's characters or t-shirts or re-releases or updated releases, usually there's a good reason to get it. I mean, it's not just a marketing thing. We're just repackaging it. There are usually extras or, like you say, new commentaries or new artwork or something with it. Are we back?
Oh, we're back. Yeah. I don't know
Oh
what
yeah,
happened there.
Grant. Did it go on your side as well? Did it?
Yeah, I don't know what.
Oh yeah, Grant. Yeah,
Yeah, we're back
yeah, cool. Yeah.
now.
So I don't know where that cut off, but yeah,
Yeah, just I often wonder, was it the nostalgia, of maybe loving a new movie, but I do think that I suppose they're quite clever with, you have to give something more to make people want to go buy it again. I think it's fine to repackage a release from 20 years ago and just say, oh, look, we've got to put a new cover on it.
yeah,
But I do think now you notice that more and more, like companies like Scream Factory and stuff, they jam pack it with all these special features. So I
true.
suppose for movie buffs, you've got enough there to warrant, I suppose, spending another 30 or 40 euros on another
Yeah,
copy of the movie again.
but that's it. And like it is, even when you just come to the movies, you're going for you bought the we'll say DVD, and you're gonna buy the Blu-ray, and then you're gonna get the 4K Blu-ray. It's just what you're gonna do. Like, so, yeah. And then if they re-release it again with, like you say, all the extra stuff, it's like, fuck you.
Yeah, because I've only done that recently actually, with Dog Soldiers. So I have the tape, then I have the original DVD, I have the re-release of the DVD, I have the Blu-ray, I have the Spanish release of the Blu-ray, and now they've just announced they're doing, I think it's Second Sight Films are doing like a special edition this summer,
No
and
way.
it comes with like a book and all this other. art cards and different things, and I was like, "Jeez,
Yeah.
I'm sold straight away." It was like
Yeah.
£40 or something. And I'm like, by the time I get this here with import and whatever, it's probably gonna be like 60 or 70 quid. I'm like, I must be insane. But
Yeah.
then I can't
I,
help myself at the same time. It's like I love that movie. I've loved that movie for years, and
it's an amazing movie
yeah, I
and
was just sold.
an amazing audience movie. Like it's like watching that film with an audience. Have you done it with an audience? Have you seen it with an audience?
I did once.
Isn't it just so
Yeah,
good? Like it's
yeah.
just there's some movies that play so well with an audience, and that is one of them. It's cracking, and apparently I saw it there at the Spook Screen Festival down here. They showed it at that festival, and it was amazing. But oh, what's his name? Oh, the name has gone out of my head now, and I can picture him. Anyway, one of the actors was there, and he was saying that they used to show that movie over in war zones to the soldiers, and the soldiers loved it. It was like really like a sort of I don't know, a cathartic movie
Mm-hmm.
that they just absolutely loved. And when the requests were going out, what movie we're going to watch, it's like we're going to watch Dog Soldiers. It's amazing how you know
Yeah, yeah. And you know what's mad as well? Like to hear that whole story of how that all came about and got made, and it's quite low budget and kind of an out there idea. Um, and now to see like the reception it still gets. I think it was like 20 years old there yesterday or the day before,
oh,
and I'm actually very surprised that they haven't really revisited that. I know there was always rumblings of a prequel, but I had seen there recently now. Neil Marshall had said like that they're toying with the idea of going back to it. Do you? So while I love it, and part of me wants more, um, I also worry sometimes. I'm like, is that what made it so great? Is just we got it. We always wanted more, or to find out maybe the origins of the werewolves and stuff. But then also me not knowing that, maybe that's what makes it.
yeah, I'd be like you. I'd be happy to leave that as it is,
Mm,
and not go either side of it. Just it's perfect as it is. Don't mess with it.
just
Now,
leave it alone.
yeah, that's it. Maybe he's got an amazing idea, and we'll be thinking, oh wow, but my instinct would be leave it.
To leave it be, yeah. Um, so like right now for you, then like we've been kind of the world is getting back to some sort of normality, I suppose, in the last little while. Uh, what does an everyday look like for you? Obviously, without getting into the nitty gritty, what's your kind of schedule, your processes every day that you kind of go through?
It's pretty much unless I'm shooting something, because I shoot different things, either for myself or like corporates or artists. I work with different artists who be shooting stuff. So unless I'm doing anything like that, I'm much writing most of the time. Most of the time, but then I'm also listening to podcasts or watching different things on YouTube in terms of camera lighting,
Mm-hmm.
direction, listening to different people talking about the craft. So all that sort of stuff. So that kind of makes up my day.
And I suppose I have a couple of questions before I let you go, and one of them is going to be around advice for somebody who's maybe an aspiring writer or a filmmaker. Um, what pieces of actionable advice I suppose would you give? I find a lot of times you ask that question, you get, oh, just go out and buy a €1,000 camera and just like just make 15 movies and just release them all on Netflix. And that's why I always ask, like, actionable, like something that somebody can actually do. And
Yeah,
would you say that that's one? Listening to podcasts, watching tutorials, and then kind of messing around with different things.
I'm back. You're back. All
Yeah,
right.
here we go. I don't know what's
Um,
going on with this program.
yeah. I would say, yeah, definitely listening to podcasts, watching different things on YouTube. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of good advice there. Also, getting together with like-minded people who are happy to help each other out. It's a huge thing, and shoot anything because and you don't like that. Shoot it on your phone. I mean, you know, loads of people have shot great films on their phones, so just shoot it on your phone if that's all you have. But just get together with people, and chances are the early stuff won't be all all you want it to be, and don't be discouraged by that
Hmm.
because the more you shoot, the better you get, and just keep doing it.
Yeah.
That would be what I would say.
And something I touch on every now and again, and I don't know if you deal with this. I have so many people reach out to me, to ask this question about this idea of like imposter syndrome. And, I suppose being, when you get a little bit of, you start to get success and you actually start to realize these dreams you have, I think there's always a sense of like, fuck, when am I going to be found out? When, when are they finally going to realize that I'm actually terrible or I'm awful or this is a lot harder than it looks? Um, have you ever dealt with that? Do you deal with that? And how do you, I suppose, overcome that? Is it just a case of just keep moving forward and just try and ignore it?
I'd say that is the best advice because definitely, definitely, it was there at the start anyway. And I remember particularly when I was sending scripts out and they were getting interest from producers, and I had this meeting with a producer over in London, and I was out of my depth, completely out of my depth. It was the first time I'd ever been. I didn't know what the hell. I'd no one I knew had been in this position. I'd no advice or anything. I went into the office. I was standing there. They were talking to me. I was thinking, I don't know what's going on, but I was thinking, they want my thing. That's great. But I was like exactly like that, complete imposter syndrome. I was like, how did I get here? I was writing this stuff in Tullamore, and now I'm in a producer's office in London who is giving me a contract on the thing I've been writing.
Yeah.
How did this happen? And like, am I going to wake up in a minute? Is this is this
Mm-hmm.
real? Um, and I think I don't it probably it fades over time. I think it's probably always there to a certain extent. With anyone, and it's probably a good thing it's there because otherwise you could turn into an arrogant asshole thinking, "Oh, I'm the shit." I think having a little bit of it and a little bit of those nerves isn't a bad thing. But I think, I suppose, like everything, I mean, it's, I listen to like that, different podcasts, and some of them be saying, the way to get over embarrassment about something, whatever it is, if it's like you don't like to walk into a full room of people or whatever, is just to keep doing it,
Mm-hmm.
until the point where it just goes away. And I think there's probably a truth in it because I remember being nervous about flying when I was younger, and then at the time I was going to be moving over to London for work, so I was pretending I was there and I was taking cheap Ryanair flights over to these interviews, and I had so many flights over and back that the nerves just went, and I didn't care less about flying. So I
Yeah.
do think there is a to like just keeping doing the thing that you hate doing if it's something that's good for you, like networking or like going to a film market or pitching or any of these things. I think just keep doing it, and it just gets a little easier every time.
I definitely agree with that. Like so many times I have to still have that conversation with myself about like and I tell so many people even like I mentioned before with the jiu-jitsu thing, I see people come in the door, fresh face, brand new, and I can feel exactly how they feel. And uh, like I can still remember, and it's that thing of like, oh god, why did I come here? And it's like, look, you obviously came here for a reason. There was a reason you
Mm.
wanted to come here, and I think it's just the things of like, you're walking in front of a class of people, or oh god, what if I get pulled out in front of everybody, or Jesus, what if everyone else can do it and I can't? We're back, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
we are.
not
Yeah,
sure what is going on with this program today, but
yeah,
it just keeps freezing on my
uh,
side. Um,
yeah, yeah. Same here.
but yeah, like I just think it's mad. I definitely agree with what you said about just having to do, like you said, if it's good for you and if it's something that you actually want to do, obviously don't torture yourself, but
Mm.
honestly, like the not glamorous side, I think of a lot of this is it is going to feel like shit sometimes, and it's going to be like, you're going to be sweating and just feel awful and just like upset stomach and butterflies and nerves and all this stuff. Like I remember when I've always had the idea of, I'd love to sit down with these people who make the things I love so much and pick their brain for, I suppose, for selfish reasons in a way, just because I was so interested. And then when I realized that so many other people were interested in hearing about that, then I was like, oh, I'm just not the guy who can talk to people and do that. And then the idea of somebody listening to me talk, I was like, oh, that is awful. And then I, the first person I ever interviewed properly was Eduardo Sanchez, the director of the Blair
Right.
Witch, and it was
Well,
like you said. It was one of those situations where, and if I know he listens to some of the episodes. If he's listening to this, he doesn't know this, but I had literally never interviewed anybody in my entire life, and I made him like this big email pitch about like how long I had been doing it and how great I was. And I remember sitting there, much like you said about that meeting in London, and being like, "Oh God, how or what or why did I even do this?" Because he's gonna know within 2 seconds. He's had so many interviews. He knows I'm a fraud. Oh shit.
yeah,
And then we had this great conversation, and it just became like, I guess, addictive, but also for a long time, I still, every time right before I speak to somebody, I'd be like, Jesus Christ, they're going to think I'm a fucking idiot. And why am I talking to them if I'm just me and they've made this thing? And I was like, wait, but I'm not on, I don't need to be a par with them. I'm there to facilitate their message and what they have done and pick their brain. So it's like, I don't need to be a filmmaker who's made all these films and done all this stuff. And I just think so many people struggle with that. I get so many messages every time, somebody hears that a certain person's coming on the show, and they're like, ask them this, ask them how did they not get embarrassed, ask them how do they put themselves out there. Um, like you said, I suppose the good and the bad side of that is is as simple and as hard as just you're gonna have to keep just doing that thing you don't want to.
yeah, absolutely. And if you get the buzz from it and that, and the thing is, you're saying that, but you can be guaranteed, like anyone coming on the show, like I'd be, you say, oh, let's talk, and I'm thinking, God, I hope now when I come on there that I've something interesting to say, and that it's not
Mm,
just like, and I'd be thinking, yeah, Aaron's very knowledgeable in horror, like really, really knowledgeable, and I'm thinking, yeah, I hope now that that I could talk to him and we could talk about films or we could talk about all this stuff and that I'm not thinking, oh, he knows way more about all these,
mm,
obscure horror movies or found footage movies or that, so I think it
yeah,
applies
yeah,
every side.
across
You
the
might be
board.
nervous, but and the same could apply. Maybe you're going to see a producer and you're thinking, oh my God, this producer has done the thing. And the producer might be going, oh, I've got this director coming in, what am I going to say to that? I hope they want to work with me. So you never know what the other person is thinking. You just,
Yeah,
we
that's
all
true.
think, oh, we're the ones coming in all nervous or whatever, like, but it's not always the
Yeah,
case.
there's two sides to that.
Mm.
Okay, so two final things. Is there anything due out this year that you're like really excited for in the horror genre? Is there any film, maybe TV show, anything like that that kind of sticks out that you're like looking forward to?
And I don't know. To tell you the truth, I don't know what's coming out. I've no finger on the pulse as to what's kind of coming out. So I couldn't say. Nothing jumps to mind. I mean, I'm looking forward to go back the way I want to watch X. I didn't get to see it in the cinema,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, and I do love Ty West's earlier movies. So I am looking forward to that. But that's already out. TV series wise, yeah, I'm not really aware of anything.
It's
No,
funny,
no.
right? It's funny you say that because as I was asking that question, I was like, Jesus, please don't bounce that back to me because I also don't know. Um, I feel like as much as you consume all this stuff and you have your finger on the pulse to a degree, there's just so much so often that like sometimes I just kind of someone say like, oh, what are you excited for? I'm like, I don't even know what's coming out. I'd actually have to like Google it to find out. which I suppose is a good thing in a way. We have that
Me
much to
too. And I
consume.
do like I obviously yeah, that's it. That's it. And I do end up even watching. Like I put on Amazon last night. I was watching this old film that one of John, who was in Beyond the Woods, he had recommended it. Pin. It's like it's a 4:3 aspect ratio, and like it's old school. It's old school, really old school horror with Terry O'Quinn in it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's funny. I just put on these old movies, and I'm thinking I know nothing about it. I didn't even look it up on IMDb. I didn't look at the rating. I didn't look. Someone said to me, I enjoyed this movie. Someone who I know loves horror movies. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna watch this.
Give
I'm
it a
gonna sit
go.
down and watch
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
I love when that happens as well.
yeah.
Um, where can people support you? Is there a place that you'd like to direct people to, or anything you'd like to plug or mention that would be good, for people to check out?
Well, they can always find me on SeanBreathnach.com, which is my own website, and then I suppose if they're interested in seeing any of the short horrors, they're on YouTube, on my own channel on YouTube, and you'll find that on SeanBreathnach.com as well. And then if they want to see Beyond the Woods, it's on Amazon Prime over here at the moment, so it's easy to watch. So that's it.
So for everybody listening, the same as always, in the show notes, wherever you're listening to the podcast, the links to all those things will be down below. So to Sean's social medias, his website, anything like that will be down below. And I'll put the link as well for Beyond the Woods on Amazon. I'm assuming, I'm not sure about the States and stuff like that. So the link will
It's
be,
on this. Yeah, it's on Amazon over there too. It's on Tubi over there. It goes around, but you can watch it on a lot of
yeah.
platforms over there.
Well, whatever links I can find will be down below anyway to make it easy for everybody. Um, Final question then before I let you go is why horror and what does it mean to you?
I suppose it's because, like I said to you earlier, that because I ended up reading so much of it,
Mm-hmm.
that you just have to go with what grabs you, and it grabbed me at that early age and has continued to do so. And even now, when I'm like I said, I'm writing a couple of horror feature scripts, and I've got another few horror feature scripts written, and they just seem to be the thing that I really enjoy. I enjoy watching them, I enjoy writing them, and I enjoy making them.
And what is it? I guess just to touch on that lastly, what do you think it is, at least for you personally, that you do enjoy them so much? Is it the fact that I don't want to say they're so far fetched, but they're so out there. You can go to all these different worlds and kind of experience it a little bit through the screen, and then kind of, oh, I'm back. I'm safe. I'm at home on the sofa.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like, is there an adrenaline rush or a dopamine hit to be got from them that
Mm-hmm.
once you start, maybe it's a bit addictive to just keep dipping into the well, and then like that, like we were saying earlier, there's so many subgenres in horror that there's so much to see, and you think, oh, I've seen I've seen pretty much everything now, and then
Yeah.
along comes some obscure thing on one of the channels or somewhere, and you're
Yeah.
like, you're never going to have seen everything. So it's just such a deep well that it's very alluring.
Yeah, I feel like ideas, there's always going to be a fresh idea or a unique take, which is the interesting part about it. That's why actually I try to do this thing now where I recommend something at the end, and those found footage VHS movies.
Yes.
Uh, the reason I enjoy them, look, some of the segments obviously are a bit out there, but I kind of enjoy them because they can be so bizarre and random, and you're kind of like, where the fuck is this story going? I don't even know what's happening.
Mm.
And I think that's the fun part about horror. It can be anything, and it can mean anything and be anything to anybody. And that's the exciting part about it. Sean, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise, Aaron.
I hope we can do this again, maybe when things move forward a little bit, because I know it's always difficult, and for lots of reasons you can't really talk about specifics of projects that are in development and stuff. But maybe later in the year, when some things have hopefully gone through, we can revisit and maybe chat about some of that stuff in more detail.
I'd love to. I really enjoyed it, Aaron, and thanks for for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, for anybody listening to the episode, all the links to Sean's stuff will be down below in the description wherever you're listening to this podcast. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.